Black Mesa is what happens when an obsessive fanbase is more willing to keep a franchise alive than the company that created it. In the absence of any indication that Valve views Half-Life as anything more than a series of ambitious tech demos, the fine developers at Crowbar Collective took it upon themselves to show the series some love. Developed over the course of 15 years and starting out as a mod before transitioning to retail product, Black Mesa was developed to take advantage of the various technical advancements that have been made since the 1998 original: dynamic shadows, enhanced lighting, impressive particle effects, and women. Since the game is still relatively recent, I feel obligated to give a spoiler warning here, though it's mostly the same as the original from 25 years ago. With that out of the way, it's time to grab your crowbar and get ready for a day of work at... I don't think it's controversial to say that the original Half-Life is one of the most revolutionary games ever made. With its advanced character animations, complex scripted sequences, and highly interactive environment, it completely changed the gaming industry, and especially first-person shooters. In a similar vein, I don't think it's controversial to say that its sequel, Half-Life 2, is also one of the most revolutionary games ever made. Next-level facial models and animations, the most advanced physics system ever put in games, and top-quality voice acting. On top of these innovations, both games were really well designed, with intricate levels populated by a diverse cast of enemies that necessitated a constant shift in strategy from the player. You were constantly doing something new in these games, whether it be shooting monsters, bobbing and weaving behind cover during a shootout, or solving a puzzle to progress. This gameplay variety was embodied in the tagline of Run, Think, Shoot, Live. After the release of Half-Life 2, that wait for a follow-up was legendary, giving birth to a variety of internet memes that were at first funny, then annoying, and now just depressing. It's become clear in the past few years that Valve has no real intention of continuing the series, outside of trying to use name recognition to push some kind of hardware release, meaning that the chances of a mainline entry coming out is pretty much nil at this point. The good news, though, is that part of what has elevated the series to such a legendary status amongst the fanbase is the massive number of fan-made creations that have been created over the years. Taking the form of mods that make use of the engine and assets, the output of the fanbase has gotten increasingly professional and high quality in the series' 25-year history. The culmination of all this has been Black Mesa. Originally conceived as a mod for Half-Life 2, developed in response to fan dissatisfaction with Valve's port of the original to Source, over the course of its sprawling 15-year development, it gradually morphed into a much more ambitious project. While the final product is still very much a remake, retaining a lot of the original level layouts that were designed back in the day, there are a lot of changes that keep it from feeling like a retread of someone else's work. It's refreshing and a little relieving to see something that was in development for so long turn out this good. Like a lot of people, I got burned by Duke Nukem Forever, so when a game has a super drawn out production like that, I get more uncertain that it'll actually be worth a shit. For reference, the first time I ever heard about Black Mesa, it was titled Black Mesa Source, and I had just beaten Half-Life 2 after getting the orange box for Christmas while I was in middle school. It finally released in 2019, 5 years after I graduated high school. The thing you have to understand is that Crowbar Collective, for most of its history, wasn't a standard development studio. Since it was originally a mod, it wasn't a team of professional paid devs working from an office, but instead a collection of enthusiasts who did it with no expectation of payment. So yeah, a bunch of nerds making a super polished game in their free time in between juggling commitments to family, friends, and work. Makes sense it would take a little bit. But enough about the development. What about the finished product? Like I said earlier, the game remains very faithful to the original in terms of layout, but makes a lot of changes to the visuals, story details, and atmospherics. Other than the graphics, which are obviously very different, the second most notable change is that they added women. Black Mesa in the original was a bit of a sausage fest. In the tram ride at the beginning, they make a comment about the facility being an equal opportunity employer, which is clearly not the case in OG Half-Life, where the entire lineup of friendly NPCs looks like your average Reddit meetup circa 2012. Crowbar Collective broke the lore though, and actually makes good on the Intercom's promise of egalitarianism by going through the trouble to actually make female NPCs. Fun fact, the first game actually did originally have femoid scientists, but they were cut out to save memory space. Let's see what they looked like. Well, it was the 90s, I guess. The intro is pretty much unchanged, some minor layout alterations here and there, but for the most part, I still found everything right where it's always been. Because it's on the Source engine now, you get a lot more interactions with objects, including a really cool scene that mirrors the "pick up that can" part from the intro to Half-Life 2.
Drat. No toilet paper. Be a dear and fetch me a roll of toilet paper. Hello? Hello? Could somebody get me some toilet paper? Excuse me. Thank heavens.
I love this whole sequence. Most other shooters in the 90s didn't do this sort of thing. You click start and you were immediately shooting shit. That's great in its own way, don't get me wrong, but Half-Life was the first game to really put a lot of effort into creating its own world and putting you in it. Alright guys, it's my first day at this new job I got at this secret research lab. I can't wait to start researching. Holy shit, the whole goddamn place is falling apart. What the hell? Alright guys, back to you with another vlog. I'm currently fighting for my life during an alien invasion. All my coworkers are dead. I'll keep you updated. Welcome to my new Instagram story. Still trying to survive hordes of extra-dimensional mutants that want to eat me. I heard the military is on its way to help out. Can't wait for that. I've always been a big supporter of the troops. Back on TikTok and the military showed up, but these dumbass meatheads are shooting at me and I have to fight back. I've never fired a gun before, but it's a good thing I'm the player character, so I'm basically invincible. One of the things I've always loved about the Half-Life games is that even though they're much more story-based than most other shooters, they rarely take you out of the gameplay. A lot of the world and narrative is conveyed to the player through gameplay, environmental storytelling, and ambient dialogue. This serves to establish the plot, characters, and groups of interest, while still allowing the player to run around like a psychopath and blow shit up.
Believe what you did.
Despite being a fan release, Black Mesa comes really close to matching the quality of the original game. Fun fact, Dario Casali, one of the level designers of the original game, who's also famous in the Doom community for being one of the psychopaths behind the Plutonia experiment, started playing through the original release while working on Alyx. He gave up halfway through though and just played Black Mesa instead, saying that it's a superior game overall. I don't know about that, but I will say that I consider Black Mesa to be in the same realm of polish that Valve games are. One of the reasons for this is that while they do stick pretty closely to the original design of the levels, they're not over-reliant on the talent of people from 20 years ago to carry their game. Black Mesa is very much its own game, and it does make a good bit of changes that keep its identity distinct from that of the original. The first one I noticed was in the third level, Unforeseen Consequences. In the original, you get the crowbar almost immediately after you wake up, but in Black Mesa, it's a little bit into the level before you get a hold of it. This makes you a lot more reliant on that Barney guard early on to escort you through the horde of zombies you encounter. It's been a few years since I played the 98 release, but I don't remember ammo being as scarce as it is in this game at first. It really feels like a survival horror game towards the beginning, having to manage your supplies and explore as much as you can for resources. Half-Life as a franchise has never been an outright horror game, but they've definitely flirted with it a good bit. Most people will point to Ravenholm and Half-Life 2 to make this point, or talk about a lot of the early concepts for the sequel, but I think Office Complex is really the most deserving of the Resident Half-Life moniker. Since I mentioned Ravenholm, now's a good time to mention that I will never not have intense animosity towards Valve for shafting Arcane on their Ravenholm expansion. Another big thing they changed is the length of the chapters on a rail and surface tension. This creates some controversy in the community, with one guy going as far as to recreate the levels in their entirety as a workshop mod. Now when I did my playthrough, I definitely noticed that on a rail was shorter, but I didn't expect people to have as much fondness for the original as they did. It was always one of my least favorite levels, and I remember back in the day that was a common sentiment on various Half-Life forums. Not really sure where the sudden love for this level came from, but either way the workshop mod is really cool. The one that makes me scratch my head is surface tension. This was my favorite level in the original, and yeah, it was long, but that was what kind of made it so good. By the end of it, you really feel like you just fought your way through a war zone. It makes the relative calm at the start of Forget About Freeman kind of refreshing. The good news is that in Black Mesa, surface tension is still long as shit, so I didn't notice the decreased length that much, but it was still kind of a strange design decision to me. Since one of the reasons Half-Life was so groundbreaking was its narrative delivery, it only makes sense that a lot of the changes made to the game went towards trying to enhance that aspect. A lot of steps are taken to bring the game's story more in line with the retcons introduced in Half-Life 2. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, in the sequel, a lot of the throwaway NPCs NPCs from the first game were given backstories and upgrade to major characters. Eli Vance and Barney Calhoun are the most notable examples of this. In a neat bit of fan service, they show up within the story of this game now in the places that they reference in Half-Life 2. Kleiner also shows up, and we get a fun reference to Magnuson when the casserole goes kaboom, plus the guard at the beginning makes a comment about Gordon cutting his ponytail, which is a reference to Gordon's deathmatch model. Just a lot of awesome little stuff like that. My one singular nitpick in this regard is the G-Man. Now, it doesn't surprise me that they had to use a new voice actor for him. I don't hold that against the devs at all, but something about hearing a voice other than Michael Shapiro's come from this character model just feels wrong to me. The original is so iconic and perfect for the character that it's hard to replicate. There's also been some smaller changes to the weapon balance in combat, stuff like the SMG having a smaller mag and the HECU being more aggressive because they use the Combine's AI as a base. For the most part though, it all felt familiar. SMG and shotgun are still the staples, Magnum still kicks ass, pistol for headcrabs and barnacles, hive-handed snarks are a meme, and the crowbars for breaking every crate you come across. Where the biggest changes lie, and what was the primary reason that the game took so long to come out, is in the final 4 chapters. After spending the whole game fighting through the labs and corridors of Black Mesa, you go through a teleporter in the Lambda complex and find yourself in the staging point of the invasion, the alternate dimension of Zen. These 4 chapters have always been really contentious among the fanbase, with some hating them, some tolerating them, and some even really liking them. The developers themselves were never too happy with how they turned out, and have since admitted that their design is largely due to the fact that they were out of time and money at the end of the development cycle. As a result, Crowbar Collective made the decision to completely redesign these levels from the ground up. For my part, I've actually always kind of liked the originals. They weren't great, and I thought they were a bit of a dip in quality compared to the rest of the game, but when the core gameplay loop is so satisfying, it's kind of hard to make a level that's just irredeemable in my opinion, if you know what you're doing. With that being said though, I think these new levels blow the originals out of the water. This is the only part of Black Mesa that I think is full stop, beyond a shadow of a doubt, superior to the original. From a visual, audio, and gameplay perspective, these levels are absolutely incredible. I've made a big deal about one of the strengths of Half-Life being its constantly changing activity loop, something that was mostly absent in the original depiction of Zen. Here though, it's on full display, with a mind-boggling variety of combat, platforming, and puzzle sections that seamlessly flow in and out of one another. The puzzles here especially are really neat, taking full advantage of the new features of the Source engine and adding stuff that just wasn't possible in the original Gold Source title. I think the visuals are also absolutely amazing. The first appearance of Zen was largely due to hardware limitations of the time and less due to any artistic vision. In Black Mesa though, you get this stunning depiction of what looks almost like the native habitat of many of the aliens you fought throughout the game. My favorite thing is how different each chapter is from one another visually. The first one, Zen, is set in these lush alien jungles filled with all kinds of extraterrestrial wildlife and even the remains of research camps set up by those who have come before you. Gonar's lair now looks like this cross between a giant anthill and a spider's nest, which serves as the perfect backdrop for your fight against a giant enemy nutsack. You also get a badass chase scene with a bunch of gargantuas that is hype as fuck. Interloper is my personal favorite because of how they reuse a concept from the original Half-Life's development. In the early days, before work had even started on Zen, one of the things that Mark Laidlaw, the lead writer on the project, wanted to do was have the player fight through the innards of a giant organism. Unfortunately, technical limitations prevented Valve from being able to implement this scenario. Those same technical limitations are no longer present in the modern day, meaning that Black Mesa was able to resurrect this concept and put it to use all these years later. This level is long as fuck, almost overly long, as you work through a labyrinthine organic factory in an attempt to make it to the top of an impossibly large spire. Once you reach the peak though, you go through a teleporter and enter the final level. It's a giant fucking fetus with psychic powers. That's not a joke, it's really supposed to be an embryo. The final boss, Nihilanth, is really interesting because he, along with the head crabs, is pretty much all that's left of Half-Life's original visions as a game that took a lot of visual inspiration from the realm of body horror. A ton of monsters got cut from this game, and several of them, along with the whole organic alien caves concept, were made with the express purpose of eliciting feelings of revulsion and disgust from the player. As the game developed more though, there was less space for a lot of this though, and it was gradually lost in the translation from prototype to finished product. We still got this motherfucker though, deformed Jimmy Neutron looking ass. The fight with him here is a bit more difficult than the original, which was piss easy. I actually died a few times in this level, but it's nothing too crazy, and he went down the same as he always has. I was already into this game, but these last 4 chapters really sold me on the whole thing. Earlier I said that I wasn't sure if this game can be said to surpass the original, and I stand by that. That's not to say that it's an inferior work though. It may not surpass the first game, but it does stand alongside it. This is an incredibly high quality product, which goes to show the immense level of talent that has built up over the years in the community surrounding custom content for the Half-Life series. I've been really bitter for a long time about the way Valve handled Episode 3 and has continued to handle the series into the present. It's always seemed to me like they don't really care much for Half-Life, other than as a symbol or mascot for the company. Half-Life fans were left hanging after Episode 2, and the most we ever got was Alyx, a game that looks really cool, but is exclusive to VR and has a twist ending that is borderline insulting to the fan base. I don't normally like to make those kinds of statements, but I don't know what else to call it when you erase a cliffhanger ending that people have been waiting a decade for a resolution to, just because you want to cover your ass now that you've lost the original writer. Add to this the aforementioned shafting of Arcane on Return to Ravenholm, the complete lack of communication or updates regarding Episode 3, which led to the fans waiting for a conclusion that was cancelled without them even knowing, and yeah, it's hard for me to not get ass hurt about the way they've treated this series. With that said though, Black Mesa has convinced me of one thing: Half-Life doesn't actually need Valve anymore. Between stuff like this and Entropy Zero 2, there's a level of talent that exists within the modding community now that rivals that of Valve's own. If they don't give a shit about the series that much anymore, that's actually fine, because the fanbase has shown that they're more than willing to continue it at this point. To me, Black Mesa seems almost like a sign from Valve, them basically saying, hey, we don't really have any intention of using this franchise for anything more than tech demos, so if you want a new one, why don't you make it? At the end of Epistle 3, Laidlaw wrote, from the perspective of Gordon Freeman, that there were holes in the story that he told, things that he couldn't quite remember, threads of a plot that had begun to elude him. Gordon also expresses uncertainty about the future of his world, unsure of what has happened since his disappearance at the end of the last story, and unsure of what the future holds for his universe. In the closing lines, he leaves the job of filling in the gaps to the player, to come up with their own interpretations and ideas of what transpired in the Arctic, and of what could transpire in the world's future. Does it involve the Combine, Adrian Shepard, Zen, Race X, Cremators, or something completely new and unknown? That's for the player to decide. I read this as Mark Laidlaw basically acknowledging that, at least for the foreseeable future, the Half-Life series is in stasis, much like Gordon Freeman himself at the end of the first game. Valve may awaken it at inconsistent intervals in pursuit of showcasing a technological benchmark, but the company probably has no interest in a more traditional continuation of the series. It's important to note, though, that this doesn't mean the end of the franchise. Over the decades, there's only been a handful of official Half-Life titles, but there's been a near uncountable number of fan-made creations that have been what has kept the series alive and well within the public eye. Valve may not have many plans for the future of the franchise, but even if they did, it wouldn't matter as much, because in 2017, the Half-Life fanbase was left with a missive. Keep doing what you always have. Keep making mods, funny videos, fan theories, webcomics, all of that. Half-Life's story is bigger than Valve now. It's maintained and cared for by the dedicated people who put all their efforts into these fan creations. So basically, if you're a mod author or webcomic writer or whatever for Half-Life related fan stuff, don't feel beholden to waiting on Valve to update the franchise so you know what is or isn't canon. Don't feel like your work is second fiddle to an official release, because at this point, if you're one of the people making their own contribution to the community, then the world of Half-Life is yours. Except for the guy who made Hazardous Course 2, fuck that mod, I died 7,000 times beating it. Hey everybody, if you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks, it means a whole lot. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all your standard YouTube stuff that you always hear. And other than that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.